Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Dan Griffin, and I'm the director of Villanova University's partnership with Catholic Relief Services. I'll be guiding today's fireside chat, looking back to plan ahead, Laudato Si at 10. This conversation invites us to reflect on the past decade since Pope Francis shared his groundbreaking encyclical, Laudato Si, calling us to an ecological conversion and care for our common home. To help us discuss the topic, I am joined by three wonderful panelists, Vicki Hoy, Dr. Mark Graham, and Father Art Piccaro. Vicki Hoy is a senior in Villanova School of Business, studying accounting, and is an active member in campus sustainability. She is one of the contributors to this year's Season of Creation booklet. She interns at Villanova's Free Store and has leadership roles in consulting and entrepreneurship organizations at Villanova. Her engagement in addressing the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor goes beyond her extracurriculars, resulting in her simple way of living. After graduation in December, she will join Protivity as a management consultant and will be bringing the voice and perspective of students into today's discussion. Dr. Mark Graham is an associate professor of Christian ethics in the Theology and Religious Studies department here at Villanova. His teaching and scholarship focus on Catholic social teaching, ethics, and the intersection of faith and ecology. Dr. Graham has written extensively on moral theology and the ethical challenges of sustainability, offering both academic insight and pastoral vision into how Laudato Si calls communities to transformative action. He has a central voice here at Villanova in connecting ecological care with Catholic intellectual and spiritual life. He has a forthcoming book titled Catholic Environmentalism, From Stewardship to Love, which develops the moral vision of Laudato Si and attempts to construct a more non-anthropocentric Catholic environmentalism. Father Art Piccaro serves as Assistant Vice President for Mission and Ministry at Villanova. As an Augustinian friar, deeply engaged in questions of Catholic social thought and stewardship of creation, Father Art has been a guiding presence in helping the intellectual tradition and helping the community live out the values of Laudato Si. His work integrates the Catholic intellectual tradition with the urgent call to care for our common home, inspiring students, faculty, and staff to approach sustainability as both a spiritual and a moral responsibility. Our conversation will focus on three guiding questions. What have we learned? What have we done? And what is missing? Afterward, we'll leave time for your questions and reflections, and we'll conclude with some announcements from Villanova's Office for Sustainability. So thank you very much to our panelists for being here today, and to begin, centering ourselves on this topic for today's conversation. Dr. Graham and Father Art, could you share with us what the church and the world looked like pre-Laudato Si?
I don't know, pre-Laudato Si, is that more than 10 years ago? Yeah, I was around, but it was a different world, absolutely different world. Think of you where you were 10 years ago. I had just stepped into Villanova after living in Peru for 40 years and in Rome for 12. This was a different world. I'm from the Bronx. But when I stepped back into Villanova, I realized how truly privileged we are. A different community, very different. And I realized as I was visiting parishes to preach about the missions, because that was part of what I did, that many people hadn't the slightest clue of the connection between how we live here and how the rest of the world lives. So if you went to a restaurant or you went to Manella's Diner, the portions, humongous. I mean, 2 or 3 people could eat from one platter, which would probably not what happened. But after being absent from the United States for so long, just go to Target and see you could choose between one of 27 different varieties of hand soap. And I don't know how many types of toilet paper. Color, flavor, incredible. Whereas most of the people in the world, the people with whom I have the privilege to work until then, these are items of luxury. And so how we live and how we have grown accustomed to live. Come to Villanova in that very first year, how many T-shirts was I given? How many T-shirts were you given during orientation? And with what cost to make those T-shirts? I'm not talking about how much it costs. I'm talking about the human, the person behind that to produce one T-shirt. So I came in and I was shocked, and I enjoyed it. I was shocked at how alien the church was, oblivious, caught up in worship, as though that were what it meant to follow Christ. And the challenge to hear the words Catholic social thought, that even here at Villanova, it seemed as though that were a novelty. So to read that document, Care of Our Common Home, Laudato Si, what a joy. It filled me with hope. Yes, we can do. A challenge, certainly for me. But I thought to myself, we're all hearing this together. We're all hearing it. Maybe we can get on the same page. So more or less, I was in a state of shock, had realized how blessed we are, and wanted to do more to do something so that we could share those blessings.
Thank you, Father Art. So what I would say is the pre-Laudato area, environmental issues are not even close to being on our moral radar screen yet. Even though in 1990, everybody should look this up, Pope John Paul issued a document called The Ecological Crisis, in which he lays out kind of a broad framework for Catholic environmentalism. For whatever reason, that didn't have a lot of traction in the Catholic Church, even though I think it was prescient in a number of different ways and ought to be studied by students of Catholic and Christian environmentalism. But in terms of Laudato Si, I got word of Laudato Si was in the works, but it was billed to me as a document on global climate change. And I thought, fantastic, right? Global climate change is hands down the biggest large-scale malevolent force on the planet right now that threatens basically every ecosystem and every organism on the planet. And unless we get a grip on that, things are not going to go very well for a lot of different creatures. It turns out that Laudato Si was far more than a document on global climate change. It was a sprawling, almost seminary course on a theology of creation. I have to admit that in the beginning, I didn't appreciate that aspect of Laudato Si. I thought we needed a relatively terse and hard-hitting document on global climate change. But it turns out there are so many nuggets of both theological as well as philosophical wisdom in Laudato Si that I think we're still trying to uncover all those golden nuggets, okay? What I would say is that Pope Francis had two things in mind when he wrote Laudato Si. One was, Laudato Si was published 6 months before the Paris Climate Conference. He was intentionally trying to generate a lot of political momentum for a major, major international agreement that was designed to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, which actually happened. They're called the Paris Agreements now. But he was also concerned with a lot of other issues, and I think in his mind, global climate change, as well as pollution, as well as water scarcity, as well as a lot of other environmental issues are kind of a symptom of a larger problem. And the larger problem was we didn't understand the moral import or the theological meaning of creation, right? And one of the things that I think Pope Francis does remarkably well is that he tries to get us to extend our moral sensibilities, especially the way in which we love creation in a way that we've never seen before. In the Christian tradition, we are called, so whenever Jesus is questioned about the greatest commandment, right? Jesus is going to be pretty uniform, right? The greatest commandment is you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and your neighbor as yourself. So we have three objects of love. We've got God, we've got the neighbor, and ourselves, okay? Jesus doesn't talk about loving creation, about loving chipmunks and white-tailed deer and garter snakes and things like that very much. And Pope Francis, I think, is trying to get us to expand the boundaries of love to include all of creation and to try for the first time that I can find to get Christians to love creation as God loves creation, which is a remarkable theological feat that I think he pulls off, right? Just as a side note, the International Panel on Climate Change was founded in 1988. It's held annual meetings. Ever since then, we've had probably 6 or 7 major international agreements on climate change and greenhouse gas reductions. And if you look at a graph of carbon emissions, parts per million in our atmosphere, it goes up kind of like this. And if you look at surface temperatures on our planet, it also parallels that and it goes up like that, right? So despite a lot of technological sophistication, despite a lot of international agreements, what we've done in terms of trying to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions and slow down this freight train that we call global climate change has not worked, okay? Which is kind of the scary thing. I don't want to scare people, right? But I also want to be honest about where we're at with global climate change and a lot of these large-scale environmental issues. There's a lot of goodwill coming from a lot of quarters, but there's not a lot of actual demonstrable results to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. So in some ways, the fear that was there when Pope Francis published Laudato Si is still there, even though I think there's a little bit of hope that we can interject in the conversation.
Okay, thank you both for sharing. Vicki, you probably don't have a wealth of perspective on the church 10 years ago, but what have you learned from Laudato Si as our own personal calling to this call to conversion?
Yeah, so are you all able to hear me? Awesome. So I would say in 2015, 10 years ago, middle school Vicki maybe wasn't as aware of what was going on in the world, and I definitely hadn't read Laudato Si until coming to Villanova. But we did have quite an early experience with some of our classes here, even the Good Life and Ethics course, where we really delve into what Laudato Si stood for, and even just section by section going through the works itself. But what I had learned from this class was really like the interconnectedness of creation, how our consumption, our waste, our energy usage, all of that had an impact on the environment, on the poor, even on our own health and the future generations that we had. We recently had an event where we had an author come in talking about the sustainability for the poor, and this was maybe an interconnectedness with the poor that I hadn't thought about before, I hadn't come in contact with. I think as someone maybe growing up in North Jersey and coming to Villanova, I wasn't as, face to face with the direct impacts on a lot of these things that I see that people are talking about in the news and talking about in Laudato Si. But I think Villanova has done a great job at really incorporating that and bringing that to all of our students' awareness through our courses, through our events and other things that we have going on. And another thing that I've really learned from it is the need for simplicity. My boss, Aldo, makes fun of me many times for my simple way of living and how I have my favorite pair of sneakers that I just wear every single day because they're a great pair of sneakers. But I think we've seen a lot of throwaway culture and maybe the need to buy and then disregard. And I remember like when I was little, we would always patch, the elbows and patch the knees if we tore something up while we were playing. But now it's a lot easier to just buy, and then once it's broken, buy the next thing and then keep going on. But I think Laudato Si really brought to light, that's not a way that we can progress. It's not sustainable for the way of life that we have. And then the last thing, as you mentioned before, is just the hope. There is that glimmer of hope that we have, and there are small actions that we can do, and all the small actions of everyone brought together can have such a large impact. And I think being here at Villanova, we're kind of learning those small bits of action that we can bring with us into the future.
Thank you. It's very moving to hear of your commitment, to this idea, much broader than to a particular, just an encyclical, and also to hear and see that this is moving. Laudato Si has moved beyond old scholars and academia, but hopefully is being embraced and understood by an entire generation of young people who will take this to heart and see it as a genuine call to action. And in that line of thinking, Dr. Graham and Father Art, what do you see as the greatest or the most important lessons of Laudato Si? Dr. Graham.
Number one, I think the biggest lesson is we misunderstand creation. So we all kind of endorse what I would call some version of the Baconian paradigm, whereby we think that nature is kind of this inconsequential, unimportant backdrop to the more important thing of either human-divine relations or human-human relations. And what we need to do with nature is essentially control, manipulate, and revamp it so that it actually produces something valuable for us, i.e. it has a lot of instrumental value, but not a lot of intrinsic value. Pope Francis is going to say that we need to understand creation as a manifestation of divine love. So every time you go out and you're amidst the trees, you're not really amidst the trees, you're amidst divine love, right? So he wholeheartedly rejects, right, this idea of creation simply having instrumental value to us. And I'll leave it at that. Number two, and this might be the biggest lesson of Laudato Si. I think Pope Francis thinks that we wildly underestimate our capacity to love. We are creatures that are made out of love. We are creatures designed for love, and we are creatures going back to love. And he, in number 11 of Laudato Si, Pope Francis holds up St. Francis of Assisi as the model for love, right? And so Francis, right, you know, he's got his famous poem, Brother's Moon and Sister Sun, or vice versa. But he talks about the fact that we ought to think almost in romantic terms about all these things in creation, right? And have this real affective movement towards everything in creation. I'm not sure ethically where that ends up at, but I think it is important to acknowledge that our affectivity must be engaged in a broader realm outside of simply humans loving human beings and God, okay? Thirdly, and this is a lesson that has fallen on deaf ears. In chapter 3 of Laudato Si, Pope Francis articulates what he thinks are the two central elements of the current ecological crisis. And the first one is the technocratic paradigm, and the second is a misplaced anthropocentrism. I cannot tell you how few scholars are actually thinking about technology and anthropocentrism as major components to our current environmental crisis. We are such technophiles in the United States. We honestly think the technology will get us out of any kind of environmental pickle we can find ourselves in, right? If we just have, to throw good old-fashioned American ingenuity and technological optimism at it, we'll figure out a solution to this. But he says our faith in technology is a major problem. And I honestly cannot think of one large-scale environmental issue in which advanced technologies are not deeply, deeply implicated, okay? So he's on the right track. I don't think he knows where to go with this technocratic paradigm. I don't think he knows what kind of anthropocentrism is valid and which is not valid, but at least he gets those two issues out front and center on our radar screen. But lastly, to a certain extent, I don't know if it's measurable whether Laudato Si is successful or not, but to the extent that it could be measurable, my guess is I'd have to say that moral persuasion, at least from the papacy, has not worked like it should. And I know that there's been a lot of resistance to Pope Francis's Laudato Si as well as his papacy, especially in the United States, Western European countries. But there's a way in which we need to confront major, large-scale environmental issues, but I'm not sure that moral persuasion in and of itself is going to be the recipe. And I tend to think that there's got to be more engagement, especially at the parish local level. So I think that's a critical lesson to learn.
3 is the magic number, right? Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, Trinity. I like the idea of understanding God as relationship. God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, God is relationship. I find that Laudato Si, number 240, read it before you go to bed tonight. The concept that God is relationship. If we say God is love, well, love is relationship. I don't just love myself. And Francis, I believe, helps point out the fact that we don't take into account the 4th level. We mentioned the 3, which we're very familiar with. I love myself, obviously, before everybody else. I love God. Hopefully, I believe that God is worthy of love. And yeah, I guess I should love others if I love God. But the other level of God's gift to us is the rest of it, all of creation. Everything that God has created to be interconnected, interrelated. God's gift to us, to realize that creation, all of it, is a gift. And the relationship itself is the gift. I think that if nothing else, Laudato Si helps point out that we become more fully alive, more fully human, the more we relate, the more we go out of ourselves to enter into communion with others. And anybody here who's ever put up with a class from me has heard this so many times, but the fact of the matter, that I find it well expressed in Laudato Si, the importance of relationship, because here we have such an individualistic society. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. We're a capitalistic society. I earn what I deserve it. It's mine. It's private property. And this is exactly the opposite. All is gift and not given to you just for you. All is gift given to all to be shared. Everything we have and are has been given to us to be shared. That's what I find the treasure of Laudato Si, reminding us that we have received and we're called to share. And yes, everyone has something to offer. There's nobody who has nothing to offer. So the importance of Catholic social thought, those basic principles, which they're underlying the various parts. There are 6 chapters, Laudato Si. 2 chapters are devoted to see the world, observe the world. Chapters 1, chapter 3 are looking at the situation, not telling us what to do. That's catechism. Laudato Si is definitely moving from a church preoccupied about itself to a church which is in the world for a better world. So see the world as it is. Help us see how selfish we are or how selfless we can be. Chapters 2 and 4 are the second stage. They're to judge, to discern, to evaluate. What we see, we take a look at, we step back, and we try to see it from the point of view of God. So that's where those 4 principles of Catholic social thought come in. Look at the world from the point of view of the belief and the dignity of each and every human being, not just us. Look at the world from the belief in common good, willing to sacrifice for the good of others. Look at the world from the point of view of subsidiarity. We all have something to offer. Look at the world from the view of solidarity. It's not a level playing field. A lot of people left out. A lot of people held down. So those 4 principles of Catholic social thought, which is though they were brand new, created yesterday, in Laudato Si, give us another opportunity to try to bring to bear on the situation which we're observing. See, discern, and sit back and talk about it. Or act. So see, discern, and act. Chapters, we have 1 and 3 are see. 2 and 4 are discern. 5 and 6 are act. What's the next possible step that you and I can take to help make this a better world for everybody? So the see, judge, act is the greatest contribution of Laudato Si for me, because it's not telling me what to do, as though I would pay any attention. It's giving me a method so that I can decide what is the next possible step I can do, we can do, to help make this a better world for everyone. So it's always going to be of worth if we learn the methodology. See, discern, act, and discern based on those 4 principles of Catholic social law. That's why I see a tremendous contribution, that we all have something to offer, and everybody is in this together. We love to go to church and pray, go to worship and pray that God change when God put in our hands the ability to change. So the challenge from Laudato Si is assume the responsibility, the gift that we have been given, this world, a better world for everyone.
Thank you. So if I'm understanding you both, right, Father Art, you're proposing that a key lesson in Laudato Si is to bring creation into that Trinity, to see creation as worthy of our love and embrace and relationship, and to see it as, brother, sun, sister, moon. Again, worthy of a full, loving relationship. And Dr. Graham, your idea on the technical paradigm, our dependence or putting all of our hope or faith into technology, which is driven by technological and commercial insights, that will lead us, I think, as we all know, well into the world of artificial intelligence, which is itself a very huge environmental concern. But Laudato Si, if I understand what you're saying, gives us or reminds us the sense that there is no such thing as artificial love. And that's what we're called to and to hold back to. Father, Art, getting to the last two chapters, act. What is it that we're called to do? Let me ask all of our panelists, how has Villanova lived out its call to action? And more broadly, how has the Catholic Church responded over these 10 years? Which actions, whether on our campus or across the global community, do you see as the most impactful or promising? Vicki, why don't we begin with you?
Thank you. Okay. So I was mostly brought on this panel, I would say, because of my work at the Free Store, which I feel like has been such a large impact of what Laudato Si can represent at the university level. For those of you who don't know, the Free Store is a space that we have in the library where we'll take donations throughout the year, especially during move out, since it's sometimes shocking how much students will get rid of as they're moving out, but donations just from faculty, from alumni, and from students, and then offering these items back in our space for a second life and a second chance. And I think as well as that, there's also the bike program that we're hoping to one day start up. My coworker in the back there, Peter, has been working on fixing up bikes to hopefully allow for a transportation method where students are able to access these bikes to get around campus in a more sustainable way. And then as well, there are also like sewing machines in the space, and maybe we haven't utilized them yet, but one day there could potentially be like a maker space on campus or somewhere else where we're able to incorporate more of Laudato Si, because it's only really just started recently, these efforts, but there's a lot more room for growth. And it's definitely so promising so far with how many people utilize it. As well, we had a wonderful pop-up shop where a lot of these senior donations that they had left during move-out were then offered to the freshmen during their move-in. So they were able to access these items that we know that the students want, because that's what the senior students had left behind. So they were able to access this, even though there were still quite a few people who came up to us asking, how do you get to Target? How do we buy these items? And we had to tell them, like, we already have these items here. And then on top of that, we had just had the day of service, and there was a site visit. It was a bit last minute, I'll have to say, but we were able to have the Best Buddies group come into the Free Store space, and they were able to make signage for the stores, which up until now, we had just had a little sign that we had set up saying, this is the Free Store. But even just on top of that, the day of service that we have, bringing all of campus together, sending them to all these different sites in order to come together and really pay homage to our environment and the community that we're building here. And I think that through, as many methods that I had shared with everyone, there's a lot of ways that Laudato Si has been emanated throughout our campus, and I'm really proud of what the school has accomplished so far.
I could throw out, 10 years. 10 years ago, Laudato Si, we had Cardinal Turkson come, talk about the importance, and from that moment on, the Sustainability Leadership Council was formed by the president in order to develop a sustainability plan for Villanova. What could we do to help achieve the Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations had designated? It wasn't something the United Nations was going to do for us. It's something that we would do for the world. So the challenge, I think, was accepted, and Sustainable Leadership Council elaborated a plan which helped guide those. It focused us. It helped us make Laudato Si real to Villanova. A lot of actions, not so much, but certainly that. Laudato Si action platform that was proposed to us by the Vatican. And I'm definitely not the type of person who thinks top-down will work. somebody telling me what to do. It's bottom up. And Laudato Si Action Platform, well, what can we do? Would we be willing to sign on to these actions, commit ourselves to the basics of a plan? The university signed on. The province of St. Thomas of Villanova signed on. So Laudato Si Action Platform, it's like pushing that boulder back up the hill, because we're going against the grain. We're going against what centuries of believing that we are the center of the universe. Yes, we made the problem, and now you're asking us to solve the problem alone? No, it's with God and together. So I believe the Sustainability Leadership Council, the University Plan, Laudato Si Action Platform, signed on by many people, all of that moved us, some people on this stage, right there's Dan, to encourage others to form Ecophily, which we have been a part of from day one, which was to encourage parish care of creation teams who didn't find support in their own parish, or very little support in their own parish, to find support among ourselves, bottom up, share things that work. Like you found what work here, well, share those ideas with others. We could learn from others as well. So that Ecophily has really been, in that sense, successful. It's moving, encouraging the church, the hierarchy of the church, the pastors, the bishop, to actually assume responsibility for care for creation. I think that's a significant step forward. These are all nothing in comparison to the establishment of an office for sustainability. We have the chief sustainability officer, an Augustinian, who came to us and accepted this responsibility, who works with two other full-time people, Aldo and Ali. I mean, you might not consider them a blessing, but they are truly a blessing for Villanova. We didn't have that before. There was nobody being paid to work full-time for sustainability at Villanova University. Sustainability Leadership Council was entirely voluntary, over and above what you were already doing. And now we have tremendously gifted, talented people who are encouraging us and using modern means of communication. We all receive it. There was no communication before. It was what you did or I did, or you happened to find somebody else who was interested. No, now we have that. So that's not a minor achievement, what things have been done. Is there a lot more to do? That's the next question. Some of the things, very few things, we're going to hear much later from Ali directly, but the season of creation, that, it's not just Advent and Lent that the church is about. The season of creation is a season when we take into account the gift that we have been given, that we are part of. We're not the persons in charge of, we're a part of creation. So the season of creation, booklets, reflection, people, you wrote one of the reflections in there. So yeah, there are many, many things that we are becoming more and more involved in. Outstanding, the number of courses being offered now as opposed to 5 years ago here at Villanova. And outstanding among that is the College of Liberal Arts and Science. Incredible how much the dean and many people in that department, I am not a member of that department, many people in that department have flourished and encouraged and help other people learn more about our responsibility for building a better world. Borgo Laudato Si in Rome at the Pope's vacation villa, put there by Francis, assumed by Leo. Having been there, it's phenomenal. It is the next step. People who are influencers going there and realizing, yes, what things that we can do. So much more has been done, much more needs to be done.
Thank you, Father Art. Dr. Graham, what would you say, us here now, Villanova, what have we done that you think has been impactful, and what do you think is missing?
So I'd like to affirm what Vicki and Father Art were talking about. Villanova is a big university with a lot of moving parts, and I can't pretend that I'm going to be privy to all those moving parts because there's a lot of stuff going on in terms of sustainability and environmentalism at Villanova. A couple things I'd like to point out. I am absolutely convinced that our Villanova administration has a genuine commitment to creation care and to environmental issues. I think the signal illustration of that is hiring Father John a number of years ago, right? somebody who's working full-time and really promoting sustainability at Villanova. There have been a number of initiatives of which I'm familiar. One is the Sustainability Council that Father Art was talking about, which tries to keep environmental issues front and center on Villanova's moral radar screen on a regular basis, which I wholeheartedly applaud. We have a sustainability plan, right, for 2020 to 2030. It's in place, it's being implemented at this point, and it's university-wide and affects every department and every college of Villanova. We also have a public carbon neutrality pledge that we're going to be carbon neutral by 2050. And Dan, if I'm not mistaken, I remember you and I were on a panel a couple years ago, right? And I was complaining that Villanova was moving at a snail's pace in terms of switching over from fossil fuels for our electricity, right? Apparently that happened about a year and a half ago, right? Yes. Good. So big thumbs up on that. That's a major move towards sustainability and especially carbon neutrality. I would imagine if you would do a survey of the courses related to sustainability and environmentalism in each department, compared to 15, 20 years ago, that we'd have 5 to 10 times the number of courses addressing those issues in different departments. So a lot of really, really fine things have been happening at Villanova, and I'm convinced it's simply going to get better and better. That we still have a ways to go, but the bottom line is I would give high marks to Villanova at this point for everything that has been done in terms of sustainability initiatives.
Great, thank you. We certainly do. Here at Villanova, we have the courses and councils and plans and offices. But I think those of us engaging in these things recognize we're not the experts on ecological conversion, we're participants in it, and that it really relies on our community as a whole. So let me turn it to you. On behalf of the Office of Sustainability, we'd love to hear from you, the audience. What questions, reflections, or experiences would you like to share with our panel? We have a microphone here so that we can make sure that you're heard and everyone can understand your question. But is there anything that you would like to present from your experience or to our panel?
While you're thinking, let me spur you on maybe to think a little. So Saturday was day of service, and day of service, I think, points, we're moving. We're moving perhaps in the right direction. I would think we're moving, Laudato Si is moving us. But how much of the service for which we are identified over the past 20 years, the day of service, is something that we do for someone else instead of we do with someone else? Because integral ecology, true development, true integral human development is something that we do with. It's not something that, oh, we the saviors can, you do for you people. Your dependence on paternalism. No, we each have something to offer. And if we respect people, we'll hear what their opinion is, and they will offer and we'll share. We will learn from our day of service. We will benefit as much as the people who now we think we are benefiting by the day that we dedicate to them. So I think Villanova's done a lot, but there's something for there that the challenge to take the next step, to speak to people, to recognize that their humanity, that what they have to offer to make us, our education, and the way we educate even better. Toxic service, toxic charity.
Again, I open the floor to you, but while you're thinking, I'll take up the moderator's prerogative and ask a question. I often hear that sustainability is described in technical or policy terms. We're not a technical institute. We're not a policy institute. We're an Augustinian institution. So how can we bring faith and spirituality into this conversation and into relevance into this crisis? Anyone on the panel?
So here's what I would recommend, is that I think the best thing we can do if we want to move forward in the spirit of Laudato Si is to wild our kids, okay? So what do I mean by wilding our kids? It's very clear to me that kids don't spend enough time in nature, that most kids think about nature in terms that inconsequential, unimportant backdrop to the important things they do. But I also think it's undeniable that to the extent you get little kids out in nature and turn them loose and let them do their thing, they will fall in love with particular pieces of creation. They will become fiercely attached to those. They will try to protect those as much as possible. So let me just tell you a story. So when my kids and my son is sitting there, he's in the blue shirt, so his name is Peter, so he can testify that I'm telling the truth on this one, okay? Usually on the weekends, I get him and his sister up in the mornings, and I'd ask them if they'd want to wade Beaver Creek. It was a creek that wound about 5-minute walk from our house, right? Of course, they'd explode in glee. Yes, you're going to wade Beaver Creek, right? So we'd grab our tennis shoes, our old clothes, we'd round up some of the neighborhood kids, and off we go to Beaver Creek, right? We never had any agenda. I would spend as much time following the kids around as they wanted to explore, but I'd simply let them do whatever they wanted to do, right? They'd spend anywhere from 2 to 6 hours just meandering the creek, trying to catch frogs, throwing rocks, pushing each other around, scraping their knees, getting dirty, everything like that, right? But the bottom line was my kids, as well as the neighborhood kids, fell so in love with nature, at least that particular part of creation, that they could think of nothing finer in the world to do than to explore and to wade Beaver Creek, right? And I'm convinced today that if, for example, Walmart would ever want to pave over Beaver Creek and make a big parking lot or a Walmart supercenter out of it, that my 2 kids would become eco-terrorists trying to prevent this from happening, right? Because they're so in love with Beaver Creek, right? If we want people to fall in love with creation and by extension to fall in love with God, what we need to do is to get them out in creation and to turn them loose. Kids are naturally biophilic, just as we are. They love exploring different life forms. They love exploring creeks. Spirituality for kids is not simply about burning off excess energy, but it's about experiencing the complexity and the grandiosity of creation. And until we start wilding our kids and getting them out into creation on a regular basis, I think we stand very little chance of actually getting the next generation to fall in love with creation like Pope Francis wants us to, right? So for all of you that are going to be parents out there, don't worry about wilding your kids. Get them out there, turn them loose, let them do whatever they want to do. They might come back a little bit bloody and dirty, but they'll come back alive, right? And they'll be much better off as a result of that.
Great, thank you, because yes, we can't love what we don't know. Father Art.
I see that spirituality is an essential part of it. I feel it, obviously I'm an Augustinian, but I see that it's become more part of what the Villanova experience is. That we do realize that we cannot do it without God, and God, foolishly, has chosen to not do it without us. And so our liturgy is more taking into account the aspect of nature, creation. We have different ceremonies that are offered, different opportunities for worship, different retreat experiences. Never enough, because we would tend to form into what is traditional. But I believe that without that, at the same time, as I teach each semester, a good portion of the students would come from engineering and nursing. Any of you engineer and nursing? Which is not bad. But we tend to be the technocrats. That, yes, we can do it. And no, we can't. We caused it because we thought we could do it. That without God or some transcendent being, put the name on it you want, we are not enough. We think we've been brought up to believe that we are enough, that we can do it. It's our can-do, individualistic, right off into the sunset. We want the picture ended by the end of those 30 minutes before the next commercial comes on, and we want to solve the crime. We want to see who did it. The process is the goal. It's see, discern, act. It's the way we look at the world, not as something to be solved, but to be enjoyed, to be shared. That's our challenge. But I see that Villanova is much more aware. I'm extremely pleased. Only God could have woken this up. Much more needs to be done. But I do think that being an Augustinian Catholic university in our day and age is significant.
Yes, I think that if we have learned anything in the last 10 years, is that this ecological crisis requires our spiritual perspective and spiritual engagement. And I understand you to say what we still need to do is understand that the ecological crisis itself is critical to an authentic spiritual expression, of our times and of our realities. Vicki, a question for you is, Laudato Si is often described as both a critique and a source of hope. What gives you hope, especially in a college campus, among peers that are often come across, I think, as very anxious, sometimes often alienated, from this? What gives you hope as you look to the future of ecological action?
I would say that there was definitely a big shift coming to Villanova versus my hometown originally. Something that I talk about a lot with my sister and my mother maybe is that there's been a shift away from like third spaces or having church and any place that you practice your religion as being somewhere where people can congregate and go together and come together on trips, versus I think nowadays there's a lot of alienation between like, this is service, this is church, and this is like my career. And I just think that maybe there can be a lot that we can learn from Villanova, since I see that the church that we have on campus, it's an entire community. It's a gathering of people who are also going out together, they're doing service together, they're congregating, there's a sense of community. But I still feel like there's maybe that disconnect in hometown churches where this is just the place that you go on a Sunday morning, and when you're at school, this is just a place to work. And especially too with programs like Find iPhone and Life 360, maybe your parents are a little more concerned about you staying in, and they're more concerned about you being safe, and there's not as much like interconnectedness, as I mentioned before, of our environment and our community and our simplicity and like our sense of self within that community.
Oh, thank you. That your response calls to mind one of my favorite quotes of Teilhard de Chardin, that the future belongs to the one who gives the next generation hope. And so if we do not, I think, tend to some of that anxiety and alienation and promote the integral ecology, that we find in Laudato Si, that there is no separating this element of life or this element of life. It's not as if some parts of us are going to survive and some don't. Some communities will survive or some don't. The integral nature of creation puts us all in the same place. All of us working on this, all of us recognizing that this is gift that will either honor or lose. And so that idea of that it's this urgent, I think, call to action, but to respond with hope, not the nihilism or the despondency of, well, it's too late, as if it's too late to care or too late to love. We're here, we're breathing, we're a part of this, we're together. And I think extending that hope is a very big challenge, that we still need to do and still need to be engaged in. Okay, today we have reflected on what we've learned and what we've done, what we still need to do, and what's missing. Our panelists have reminded us that Laudato Si is not just a text to be studied, but a call to action, a challenge to imagine how we live, work, and care for creation. As we move through this season of creation, may we carry forward both the hope and the responsibility of this work. Each of us has a role to play in tending to our common home. So please join me in thanking Father Art, Dr. Graham, and Vicki Hoy, as well as all of you for being a part of this important conversation. Next, I would like to welcome Ali McAllister up to share how Villanovans we are responding to Pope Francis's call to care for our common home.
Is this on? Can everybody hear me? Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you all for your contributions to the conversation. It's great to hear everybody's perspectives. So I'm just going to take a couple minutes of your time just to share about some actionable ways that we all can be involved in sustainability at Villanova. So essentially, I'll be talking specifically about our Green Office program, but as you can see, we have lots of initiatives run by our office, and kind of like one of the themes that were touched on, they're all interconnected, they all overlap, and there's a lot of collaboration among them all. So the Green Office program, that is run by our Office for Sustainability, and it's supported and sustained through participation across campus, with faculty, staff, and also with students. And it's very much rooted in our Augustinian values, which we've shared and reflected on today. So as you can see, essentially it's a self-evaluation program for offices to kind of just audit their behaviors, see ways that they can improve, and maybe make note of how to collaborate with other offices on campus. And it matters because we have truth in our choices, unity in our collective action, and love for our common home. So if you are a part of an office, we invite you to take part in this program. If you're a student, I encourage you to kind of the offices that you interact with on a daily basis, bring this up to them, start these conversations, get involved. You can also check out the checklist yourself to audit your own behaviors in your home and your dorms. And lastly, on the one side of the slide, you can see the steps. I won't go into too much detail. I have more information if you're interested. We also have a web page that details it. But I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge and honor the offices that have gone through this certification program, that have been champions at the forefront when we restarted this program. So starting with the Office of Graduate Studies in CLAS, they were able to achieve a bronze tier certification. So just a round of applause for that office. And then next we have Falvey Library. I know we have some people here from that team. Thank you for your participation. And also Mission and Ministry achieved gold tier status, and they were very, very amazing with this whole program. We were able to certify the entire building with all the different departments in it. So round of applause for Mission and Ministry. Yes, Genevieve and Bushra. And then I also just want to acknowledge the many offices that are going through the program currently as we speak, emailing with me back and forth, taking on meetings. You know, this is extra work, but it's important work. And you can see them up on the screen, so a round of applause for them. Thank you for all the applause. And we have a QR code if you're interested, or you can reach out to me directly. I'm Allie McAllister. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I appreciate your time.
All right, that concludes our presentation for today. Thank you all for being here, coming out today to reflect and be part of this community commitment to sustainability. Thank you very much.